of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning and welcome to the October 6th Minnehaha County Commission meeting. I would remind you to silence your cell phones. There are meeting documents on the end of the counter next to Commissioner Bender in the white folder. And if you need listening devices, Robert is in the front row and he can help you with that. With that, we'll go on to routine business. Item number 1 is consider a motion to approve the agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any additions? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Item number 2 is approve the County Commission minute meetings from September 29, 2015. Is there a motion?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any corrections? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Item number 3 is bills to be paid in the amount of $242,256.96. Is there a motion?
Pay the bills.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any comments? Commissioner Barth?
Madam Chair, today's bills are pretty low, and it's about, we bump along at this level very rarely, it seems like. But today's bills do include 129 individual bills for mental health issues.
Thank you, Jeff. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those
Aye.
opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Item number 4 is reports. There are none. Item number 5 is personnel actions. Item A is consider a motion to approve the routine personnel actions. Is there a motion?
So move. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Are there any questions for Carrie? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Item B is recognize significant employee anniversaries for October 2015. Good morning, Carrie.
Good morning, Carrie Deaver from Human Resources. I have a short list for you today, but an impressive list. We have Linda Race, who's a records technician with the Register of Deeds, celebrating 5 years of service. And then we have 3 employees celebrating 15 years of service. Steve Van Wy, who's a juvenile correctional officer at the Juvenile Detention Center. Mike Mayer, who's a senior road maintenance team member at the highway. And Marty Roach, who's a road maintenance team member at the highway as well. And then we have Julie Meyer, who's with our sheriff's office, and she's celebrating 20 years of service. So quite a few employees today with many, many years of service behind them. So our thanks and gratitude go to them.
And nobody here today?
Nobody here today.
Okay. Item C is recognize volunteers in the county departments for September.
Another long list. Every month I'm coming to you with lists well over 200, sometimes closer to 300, but we have a list of 240 employees and or volunteers rather, in about 8 areas of county. So again, can't do it without them.
That's right. Very impressive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 6 is application for abatements. There are none. Item number 7 is notices and requests. There are none. Item number 8 is planning and zoning notices. Item A is first reading and authorize auditor to publish notice of hearing on October 27, 2015 to consider a zoning text amendment number 15-01 to the 1990 revised zoning ordinance for Minnehaha County, amending section 12.13B agricultural tourism permitted uses and section 26.02 definition for the purposes of including breweries and distilleries in the definition of agricultural tourism. Item number 9 is sorry.
Thank you. David Heinold, Planning Department. This is the first reading for text amendment. Text amendment was submitted by Lee Anderson and Janelle Johnson to consider allowing breweries to the proposed agricultural tourism ordinance section. The Planning Commission during the August 24th meeting directed staff to consider adding more than just breweries, i.e. distilleries to that, which this would add that breweries and distilleries to that section as a permitted special use. And the guidelines are listed out in the attached ordinance. This also adds a recall and review section that would be similar to the conditional use permit section, which would allow the Planning Department the opportunity to go back and review operations that are already out there to determine if they're meeting their conditional use permit regulations, just like what we have already with conditional use permits. In addition to this also adds and clarifies some language in the winery section to help match what was what's proposed in the breweries and distilleries section. And then the last part would be to clean up some of the definitions, that there were some spelling errors and alphabetical and numerical order. Staff requested a public hearing date of October 27th be set. So action needs to be taken to publish notice of this meeting and set the hearing date for October 27th at 9 a.m. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Any questions for David on this?
I just have one question. David, I'm curious, the change to go from 1/2 acre up to 1 acre, why that was done?
So there was a section in the existing winery's text that there was a 1/2 acre and then there was a 1 acre minimum. So by default, both of those, they kind of conflict with one another.
Okay.
So the minimum would be 1 acre planted crop, which most operations are already have that.
So what would happen to an operation right now that was working on under a 1/2 acre?
Most of it would be retroactive with.
The non-conforming use could continue as long as it wasn't materially altered, I think. So.
Okay.
Any other questions for David? We don't need a motion, do we? Cindy? We don't need a motion on that, do we? Okay.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to authorize the auditor to publish notice of the hearing on October 27th on this issue.
Okay, I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, David. Item number 9 is petition for compromise of lien, and there are none.
Thank you.
Thank you. There are none. The next one is opportunity for public comment. This is a time when someone wants to speak about anything that is not on our agenda, and if you'd limit your time to about 5
Madam
minutes.
Chair,
and
I have invited someone that spoke at our Homeless Advisory Board to just make a few comments
Okay.
at this time.
Good morning, Shereen.
Hi, I'm Shereen Ranch. I'm the Executive Director of Sioux Falls Housing Redevelopment Commission. And like Commissioner Barth said, I had talked about this topic at the Homeless Advisory Board yesterday, and he asked that I come and make you aware of it. There's a lot of things that go on in government that, as you know, we don't always understand the impact that they have on things. So this is one of those areas. And every county, every metropolitan area in the United States has what they call fair market rents. And those are established by HUD. And those come out, they usually adjust them October 1st of every year. The fair market rents, which I went back 5 years to show you what the fair market rents are for the Sioux Falls metropolitan statistical area, and that includes Minnehaha, Lincoln, Turner, and McCook counties. So it impacts, all 4 counties. And basically, I've shown that the fair market rents have not. The highest they've been was in October 1st of 2013. They were dropped in 14, and they went up slightly for this year now going forward, but not even at the level they were in 2013. Now, what that means is that has an impact on people getting affordable housing. And the reason that is, for example, those who are on a housing assistance programs, that fair market rent is used to determine how much assistance they can get. It's kind of like a cap. So people on like a housing choice voucher program where they go out and rent from private people in the community, that has an impact on how much the place can rent for that they're getting. People right now have a voucher are having trouble finding places within the rent limits, and they're going to continue to have problems. We have, as you know, especially in Sioux Falls, rents have been climbing. The vacancy rate as far as available units is like 4% right now. So the market is such that property owners can raise their rents and get them rented. So we have people that are losing their housing. The landlords are saying, your year's up, I can raise the rent a whole lot higher, so then they have to go look for something else. It also had these rent limits. The other thing you have to know is that includes all utilities. So, for example, for a 2-bedroom, $736. That's not just the rent. That includes heat, electricity, water, sewer, and trash collection. So, it's virtually very difficult to find an apartment where you can get all your utilities and your rent for that amount of money. I put, just to kind of give you an idea, twice a year, South Dakota Multi-Housing Association does a rental survey to determine what the vacancy's at, and I've got that information at the bottom there. Based on the surveys they've done of properties on the conventional market and the tax credits, because they have a little different rent limits. I've got what the rent ranges have been for each bedroom size and what the average rent. So you look like in the conventional, the 2-bedroom, the average rent is like $755 when they did that in July. So this obviously there isn't a statistically valid way they do it, but it kind of gives you a pretty good idea what's out there. The problem is the formula that they're required to use to determine the fair market rents. That formula hasn't changed for probably the 1990s sometime, and that's all established by Congress. So the only way that can get changed is you literally have to have an act of Congress to change that. They go by census data every 10 years, and then in between they use the American Community Survey. They update that with what they call recent mover data, people who moved in the last 15 months. And then they look at properties that are more than 2 years old. And then they adjust for a consumer price index. They're looking at making some modification. They're taking comments till October 8th about using a different using the consumer price index, but basically focusing on 2 components of that. And one is the rent of primary residence and fuel and utilities. If they did that, that would raise our fair market rents anywhere from $7 for a 1-bedroom to $15 higher for a 4-bedroom. So that would be a little better. But I just wanted to point this out because it also impacts programs that target people who are homeless, because those programs where they provide housing assistance also have this cap. People who are developing affordable housing, it has an impact. That includes those that are developing with tax credit and what they call home funds. And all of those use these fair market rents. They have to have a certain number of units that are within the fair market rents. And if they're too low, it makes it very difficult then for them to get the revenue to be able to pay operating expenses for affordable housing. So it does impact not only people who have assistance and looking for existing housing, but also in the development stage of it. And the other component of all this is because of the 4-county area, they don't give any special weight to Minnehaha County, because with Sioux Falls, obviously rents are higher. They give equal rates, so the rents in Turner and McCook are lower, and that pulls down the average for the whole area. So the whole way they do it is causing issues for us. So I just brought this forward just to make you aware that this could continue to impact our affordable housing in the county.
Okay, thanks, Sharina. Are there any questions, Commissioner Benega?
What's the backlog right now with your application process? I've heard that's significant.
Yeah, well, the waiting list we have for people wanting a voucher is over 3,000 households, and it's a 4-year waiting list now. We last contacted people on a waiting list in July of this year. We will not be contacting anymore now until before January, because we've got all the funding committed for this calendar year.
Okay. Additional questions, Commissioner Kelly?
Shereen, the fair market rents, that's all the landlord can charge? He can't...
That's a cap. That's like a cap.
The tenant cannot participate, right? Is that...
Right. We can go on certain programs, that's all they can charge, and that's if all utilities are included. Some programs, like the Housing Choice Voucher, we can go up to 110% of that fair market rent, but then that's all they can charge, is that amount. So if they want to charge more, we have had some landlords that are willing to lower their rents a little bit to meet that cap. Not as many as there once was, and some of them they're just way above that, and they're not going to adjust it.
So the fair market rents really are not at all realistic, is that?
Yeah, they're not. They're actually supposed to be, according to the regulations, they're supposed to be at the 40th percentile of standard quality housing. So 40% of the standard quality houses and our rental units in the area would be below those amounts, but I don't think it's accurate.
Commissioner Benega.
Shereen, one more question. If you were to take Turner and McCook counties out of that, what do you think the percentage would be to increase those dollar amounts?
I don't know the percentage, but it definitely would go up. Either that or they do some kind of a weighted way of looking at things. But the other thing is, in determining what's a metropolitan statistical area, that's actually determined by the Office of Management and Budget for the federal government. And they basically look at where they claim that at least 25% of the workforce in a county is working in the main county, which is Minnehaha County. Then if 25% of Turner County's workforce is working in Minnehaha County, then that's why they include that county in the statistical area.
Interesting.
Okay. Any other comments? Commissioner Barth?
I would just comment that because of this, the way that they're compiling these numbers, that it appears that we're getting less federal assistance than we should. And I think that's something, whichever flavor we are about taxes and spending, why would we want to have a lesser share than we ought to get? And the idea of averaging Minnehaha with McCook, you might as well do New York City and Ziba County.
Thanks, Jeff. Any other comments? All right. Thanks, Shereen.
Thank you.
That will go on to regular business. Was there any other comment? I think we had another public comment. So I just about forgot.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
I'm Brett Johnson. I work in our Human Services Department for Minnehaha County, and I'm also the board chair for the Sioux Empire Homeless Coalition, so just wanted to inform you that we're actually hosting Project Connect in our Health and Human Services building today from 9 to 1. It's actually, this is the first year that it is being co-sponsored by the Homeless Coalition and the 211 helpline. So we've got over 40 vendors or exhibitors there to provide whatever services or information about their services they can to individuals that are either homeless or are experiencing some level of poverty. So we try to make that a one-stop shop for individuals to at least access some information about services and hopefully get connected to the right services in the community. So.
All right. Thank you. Any questions? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, is there any other public comment? All right. Then we'll move on to regular business. 9 a.m. we have an adjournment as the Minnehaha County Commission and convening as a joint meeting with the Del Rapids City Council with the intent of reconvening as the Minnehaha County Commission alone for the rest of the regular agenda after the adjournment of the joint meeting. This was deferred from a joint meeting in August 25th, 2015. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second, okay. Then I would look for a motion to, from the Minnehaha County to go,
Just a vote.
okay. I'm going to call the meeting to order for the joint city council.
Nope,
We had a motion. We need a vote. Chairperson.
To adjourn, right.
Yep.
I need a motion to adjourn,
We have one.
and I have a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Now I'll call the meeting to order of the joint Minnehaha County City of Sioux Falls joint meeting, and I recognize that there is a quorum on the Minnehaha County side. I'd ask for a roll call on the Del Rapids.
We have a quorum.
We have a quorum. Do you need any more than that?
I need to list who's here in the minutes.
I need to list the names, so if you do a roll call, please.
Currently President Gary Hawk, Tom Bowie, Dave Summersell, Mary Bachman, and Mark Frick.
Recognize that there is a quorum on the Del Rapids side. I'd ask for a motion on the county side to approve the agenda for today.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. A motion from the City of Del Rapids to approve the agenda.
Thank you, sir.
I have a motion and a second. Did you get who? Did you have who they are?
I don't think there's a mic.
Okay, all right. I have a motion and a second on the Del Rapids side to adjourn to approve the agenda. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Item number 1 is a public hearing of the Minnehaha County Commission and the Del Rapids City Council to consider ordinance MC 28-01, amending the 2001 revised joint zoning ordinance for Minnehaha County and the City of Del Rapids as following: a C commercial district to RR1 rural resident districts on property legally described as Lot 1 of Overage Tract 2, Southwest 1/4, Section 8, Township 104 North, Range 45 West. Minnehaha County is hereby rezoning from C Commercial District to RR Rural Resident District, and the official zoning map referenced in the Article 2.03A is amended to include the property in the RR1 Rural Residence District deferred from August 25th. David Heinhold.
Good morning, David Heinel, Planning Department. As you mentioned this, as you're aware, the applicant Daniel Whitty submitted this rezoning application to rezone a parcel of land located approximately a half-mile west of Del Rapids on Highway 115 from the C Commercial District to the Rural Residential 1 District, which allows for residential on minimum 1-acre lots. Action on this item was deferred from the last meeting to this meeting to allow the applicant to meet with all the necessary parties and discuss the proposed rezoning with the City of Del Rapids. Haven't heard anything, but the County Planning Commission voted unanimously, and the City Planning Commission as well at the last Planning Commission meeting. A map and a copy of the minutes have been included for your review. I'll answer any questions if you have them, and can go through the pictures again, but I think we've seen those.
Okay. Does anybody want to review any of the information? All right. New developments since our last meeting?
No. I haven't heard anything.
Is there anything on your side? Go ahead.
Good morning, Jim Billion. I'm an attorney here in town appearing on behalf of Daniel and Megan Whitty. Since our last meeting, I've had opportunity to meet with the city administrator, the city attorney for Del Rapids, and then appear also in front of the city council, and we have come to an annexation agreement for the property in question that the Whittys and the city are both now comfortable with, and it's my understanding with that agreement, which they've been provided the original, that the city is now prepared to agree to the rezoning.
Okay.
If that's correct.
Okay, so we have an annexation agreement. So Cindy, would we want an approval on the commission side to approve the annexation agreement?
No.
We're not party to that.
Okay.
We're just approving the rezoning.
Okay. So any questions for Mr. Billion? All right, is there a motion on the county side?
Before we go forward, though, I would want to clarify one thing. I thought I heard you say in the legal description that it was range 45, but I've got range 49.
I may have misspoke. I have on here range 49.
Okay, thank you.
I may have said that wrong. Thank you for catching that. Comments on the commission side? Motion?
Do we act first, Madam Chair?
We act first.
I'll make a motion to approve the rezoning.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the rezoning. Is there any other comments or questions? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. I need a motion and a second on the Del Rapids side. I have a motion. Is there a second? I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. We don't need anything else, right? Can I have a motion on the county side to adjourn?
I'm sorry if I may,
excuse
just
me?
one, as a point of procedure, and I apologize for not knowing this, but does the county then need to reconvene and approve this, and then is there publication requirements before the new use can begin?
We don't need another vote. The vote in the joint session is sufficient. There are some time limit. There needs to be publication. I believe it's a 20-day period before the use can commence. That's
Okay.
our opinion from this side anyway.
I figured there was some waiting period on the publication, but they're not going to be doing anything that quickly anyway.
Okay.
So
All right.
thank you very much.
Okay, yep, thank you. I think we're
Thank
done.
you.
Is there?
Do they adjourn first, or?
Yep, we do.
You do.
Make a motion to adjourn out of a joint meeting and resume
Reconvene.
or reconvene as a county commission.
Okay. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. City of Del Rapids, motion to adjourn. Have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. You are adjourned. And
You
we will
guys can come back next week anyway.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. We are reconvened into the Minnehaha County Commission meeting and on to item number 10, which is a public hearing to consider amendment number 1501 to Minnehaha County 16-90. 1990, am I reading the right one here? Yep. Revised zoning ordinance for Minnehaha County to rezone from A1 Agricultural District to the Waterway Meadows Planned Development District. Property legal description as Tract 1 of the Prebe Edition, South 1/2 Northeast 1/4, Section 7, Township 102 North, Range 49 West of the 5th PM. Minnehaha County, Scott Anderson.
Thank
Morning,
you.
Scott.
Scott Anderson, County Planning. Today is the public hearing and potentially a final adoption of a rezoning request 15-6 to rezone 10 acres from A1 Agriculture District to a planned development to be called Waterway Meadows. The property is located at 25723 Haystack Place, which is approximately 3 miles north of Sioux Falls. Generally in this area, Kiwanis Avenue is about a half a mile to the west, and it's about a half mile north of Renner Road. So the Planning Commission had a hearing on this on August 24th, and I have provided the minutes of that meeting for your review. The Planning Commission recommended denial of the request of a vote of 4-1. I'll go through the slides for you. This would be a planned development which would allow one residential site to be built on this 10-acre parcel. That's the primary and really the sole use of this proposed planned development. You can see that it is located in an area where there is some residential development, and I'll go through the slides for you just to give you an idea. There is an existing structure on the property, and that's a horse barn that's located right off of Haystack Place. This is a picture of the horse barn. The remainder of the 10 acres is primarily pasture for those horses. This is the property that's located directly to the east across the street. This is looking straight to the north. You can see the horse barn and the corral to the side. You will also notice that the rezoning sign is clearly visible there posted on the fence post on the corner. This is a property located to the southeast of the subject property. This is looking straight south, where that haystack lane sort of makes the curve. You can see where the arrow's pointed. Once again, this is the horse barn that's there. This is looking at the property towards the southwest. This is the backside of the horse barn, and that's basically the extent of the pictures. Once again, it's really just a horse barn on a 10-acre parcel with and it's fenced in. The entire 10 acres is fenced in. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you have. Today's action, you can either uphold the Planning Commission's recommendation to deny the rezoning request, or you could overturn the Planning Commission's recommendation and approve the rezoning request. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you have.
Are there any questions for Scott at this time? Otherwise, this is a public hearing, and we will hear from the proponents and opponents and then go back to questioning. So, do you have any questions at this time for Scott? Okay, thanks Scott. We'll hear from the proponents.
Madam Chair and members of the Commission, I'm Pam Homan. I'm here representing myself and my husband, Tim Homan. I provided each of you a simple handout prior to the meeting, laid it at your spots, and I'd like to make it very clear what the intent and goal my husband and I are in this process. If I might, in 2005, this barn was issued via a Minnehaha County building permit to be built on this 10-acre parcel. In 2012, my husband and I purchased the 10-acre parcel with the barn on it. At that time, prior to purchase, the title search did not uncover or reveal any issues. In 2015, when Tim and I were then informed via interested buyers that Minnehaha County indicated the barn was non-conforming and that if destroyed, it could not be rebuilt. When I heard that information, I contacted the Minnehaha County Planning and Zoning Office to confirm that statement. I was informed that because the barn did not have a house, it was non-conforming, and I was informed that possible solutions to that would be the typical process the county would believe, that just wait for the barn to burn down. That felt problematic to me, as we simply wanted a solution to say we believed we had bought a 10-acre parcel with a legitimate barn on it via a county-issued building permit in 2005. So then, in dialogue with the Planning and Zoning Office, who were very cordial, very cooperative, and brainstorming as what possible solutions might be, the one that surfaced was to seek a planned development district for a single house. We are not seeking what I think is a legal definition. I looked at legal counsel as far as eligibility. We aren't looking for anything that's transferable. We merely want the outcome of our barn to be a legitimate barn via the permit that it was first issued with, so that if something is destroyed, it could be rebuilt. So I wrote at the bottom of this document, our desired outcome was simply that the county ultimately would acknowledge that building permit and document that the barn is legitimate and can be rebuilt if destroyed. I understand clearly that given the multitudes of statutes you must follow, that the planned development district was one manner of which to legitimize that property with the barn on it for a single house.
Okay.
I stand by for questions.
Any questions for Pam? Commissioner Benega?
Pam, when you bought the property, I'm assuming that the assessed value of the barn was considered as part of the purchase price. So you paid, in addition, if you will, to the land price, you paid an additional amount for the assessed value of the barn?
Yes, we did. And we also carry insurance on that barn. Yes.
And I frankly don't understand why you can't replace something that you purchased if a fire or a windstorm or whatever that is an act of God, if you will. If you purchase something and you're paying taxes on it and we've collected the taxes, it seems to me you should have the ability to replace that.
Are there any other questions for Pam at this point? Are there any opponents? Or, excuse me, I was just going to get opponents.
Your home is not contiguous to this at all.
No, there's a development you can see right across the street that it's contiguous to. However, our home, we recently relocated again in Minnehaha County on another 15 acres. Previously, Commissioner Kelly, Tim and I lived in the Packard Vintage Village development, which is just to the south of where this land is, and we were on a 5-acre property. We sold that and relocated in another area in Minnehaha County. And so this was always a freestanding barn with 10 acres for Tim's horses.
And the horses are here all the time?
Right now they're there. Eventually, when we get the new place fenced, they will move with us.
And is it your intent then to sell? You mentioned interested buyers.
Yeah, our hope was to sell that property, the 10 acres and the barn, yes. And it was at that point, people's interests apparently started to call down here to find out about eligibility. The property did not have an eligibility. We listed it without one. And thus, we uncovered this issue of if the barn burnt down, which clearly no buyer is going to want that, including my concern. If Tim and I keep that and the windstorm comes through and the barn burns or something, we paid for the barn, we've been paying insurance, we pay you taxes, and yet we're being told the barn is non-conforming and if destroyed cannot be rebuilt.
But if I may, according to this, if the barn was torn down, if somebody bought the 10 acres and tore the barn down, they could build a home there, right?
No.
They could
No.
not?
No,
could not.
there's no building eligibility there.
So it's not a building eligibility?
No.
Commissioner, Heiberger, but that's what, if we approve this rezoning, then there would be a building eligibility and they could build a house there.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what Commissioner
Yeah, that's what I asked.
Kelly is asking. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let me get it straight. If you sold the property, the future owner can do whatever they want, but if they in effect have a building eligibility on that property and could tear the barn down and build a house.
No. She wants to add a building eligibility to that 10 acres. The barn could stay. If we put a building eligibility, then she can have the building, the barn and a building.
But in effect, it's a building eligibility.
Right.
Okay, that's my concern. Thank you.
Is a building eligibility to make the barn legitimate so the barn can be rebuilt if it's destroyed?
Are there any questions at this point? Okay. See if there's any opponents. Have no opponent.
I'm Mike Seifer. I'm on the Planning Commission. I had sent you a letter regarding this issue by email. The issue you're talking about, rebuilding, quite frankly, stables are a conforming use if you apply for the conditional use permit. This is a private stable. If it has a conditional use permit, which had this come before the Planning Commission to build a stable, I'm sure it would have gotten approved as a private stable. But my concerns are others of, like say, this was a created problem by a building being built and eligibilities in this part of the county. You're going to technically, the irony of this, you just got into talking about people who can't put a house over their roof, and we're talking about $50,000 housing eligibilities. The diversity of what you deal with is just unbelievable at times. But horse barns are conforming use in the ag district, and that's what this is, and that's what it should remain. When you get county eligibilities, we have eligibilities, we have rules governing eligibilities. This is what, in my realm, I refer to as generating a housing eligibility. And it also gets into the other thing that's called precedence. I know 3 of you have served on the Planning and Zoning Board. And one of the things I know, Gerald, when you were on there, precedence kept coming up. Well, here's a precedence for you. I have 30 acres, and I'm going to be tearing down my old barn and rebuilding it. I have a quarter-mile long driveway. I can build that barn down by the road. And then eventually I can sell 10 acres or 20 acres, my existing place, off to my sons or whatever. And now I've got 10 acres with a non-conforming use. Well, if you approve this one, guess what? I get an eligibility too. Now, as a landowner in Minnehaha County, I have eligibilities which have value, and this just devalues that whole process. Because it's you're almost changing the density zoning ordinance through precedence, is what's happening. And because I don't know how the county would be able to defend itself if they approve this. If someone else does the same thing, well, you're going to have to approve it. Because otherwise it would be challenged. And I know that's always a concern before the planning and zoning, is what precedence does this set. And in my years on the planning and zoning, it seems like precedence is 9/10 of the law. It's just the way it works. And that's why when we start kind of stretching the ordinances, we got to be very careful, because we're going to have to live with that in the future. And it's a thing. So that's why, as a planning commissioner, that's why I voted to reject this. And I think it should be rejected. And I would encourage the commission to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Seifer. Are there any questions for Mr. Seifer at this time? Commissioner Kelly?
Mike, are you saying that if the barn burned down, they could build it back?
If it has a conditional use permit as a private stable, which is what it should be.
Scott has a comment. Scott, can we finish this part and then, well, I guess you better answer Commissioner Kelly's question.
I think I need this clarified.
Yeah.
Commissioner Seifer is correct that you are allowed to have a stable as a conditional use permit. However, the definitions of our stable are very specific. It has to be for remuneration. So you're basically, you have, what the Holmans are operating out there is not a stable. It's a barn for their own personal use. A stable is defined as a place that you board, train horses in exchange for money. So you would be boarding someone else's horses in the stable. They're boarding their own horses. They're not charging anyone. So there's a difference. I'll be glad to read you the definition of a stable, but it's not a stable.
And there's no, Commissioner, or Mr. Cipher.
That with, you can have a conditional use permit for a stable. You don't necessarily have to board anybody's horses.
That's true.
I suppose technically that is correct.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Cipher?
Yeah, thank you.
Any other opponents? The proponents have an opportunity to rebuttal if you would like.
One of the statements made dealt with this was a problem created by property owners, and I find that statement very problematic because I have knowledge of, copy of the building permit granted by Minnehaha County in 2005 that legitimately allowed this building on that property. So I do not feel that this is something the property owners have to stand alone with. And I seek your consideration as how can we creatively and cooperatively solve this problem, that we would be able to move forward with a legitimate barn on that property as permitted via your permit process in 2005.
Okay. Commissioner Bender.
So Pam, what do you think of the option that Mr. Cipher presented, that if something that you're worried about happens, that the barn somehow it's required to be rebuilt, that you could come in and get a commission, you or a future purchaser could come in and ask for a conditional use permit and rebuild that barn?
I would want the solution granted now, Commissioner Bender. I don't want
You don't have a problem right now, though.
I don't want it delayed for a future day. I don't want it delayed for someone else's problem to happen. When we're being told now that the barn is non-conforming, yet it's following off of the county building permit, it would seem to me that the commissioners at this time could address the issue. And if it's granting a conditional use permit to say that's a conditional use because so the barn can be there, I mean, ultimately that's what we want. We want acknowledgement and documentation that the barn is legitimate.
Could Scott address that issue for us, please?
Well, certainly the applicant has the potential of bringing in an application for a conditional use permit, but you cannot grant it right today at this moment because there is a notice of hearing that would have to be sent out to the adjacent property owners to let them know that this is a new use that's being proposed, that the applicant would be applying for a stable. And so we would need to do the notification, and that particular use would have to go before a hearing before the Planning Commission. You can't jump over all those steps and just approve it today.
Commissioner Heiberger?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that are confusing about this process to me, but I'm curious, first, when the building permit was issued back in 2005, was this a non-conforming use at that time?
No, it was not a non-conforming use at that time because the applicant, the property owner in 2005, which was not the Holmans, they had a larger parcel of property and they got a building permit to build that barn. And then subsequently, after they got the building permit to build the barn, they platted off that parcel of land and sold it.
So it's not non-conforming if it's on a larger tract of land?
It would not be. If it's on a larger tract of land that's used for ag, like a 40-acre parcel, then it would not be. And then the other thing that Madam Chairman, if I could just interject or give you maybe some direction that you could consider. The applicant is requesting a plan development to allow for a residential site to be able to be built on there, but you have the the possibility now at this hearing to amend those conditions. So you could make it the waterway meadows, which would just be for the stable, I mean, for a barn. I mean, that you could do because you have notified, we've gone through the hearing process or the notification, and we have published a hearing notice that there is going to be a hearing on the waterway meadows. You could make it so that the waterway meadows would just allow the barn to be the permitted use on that property.
The barn only.
The barn only.
And then it would give them, if the barn burned down, they could replace it.
That's correct. Is that, I mean, I think I'm seeing a nod from Chris.
Which basically it does the exact same thing if we sent them back through the Planning Commission to get a conditional use permit.
Basically, I mean, we are actually changing the zoning classification of this. That's the request now, is we are changing the zoning classification to a planned development. If you went through the conditional use permit, it would remain agriculture, and there could be a whole other host of uses that could eventually be permitted through conditional uses. Once you rezone it to a planned development, if they wanted to change those uses, they'd have to go through a rezoning process. It's just very similar, but just maybe two different paths that you would need to take to change things around eventually.
Commissioner Kelly, did you still have a question?
Well, yeah, the original applicant for the building permit, was that the farm that owned, the farmer that owned all that half, whatever it is, a half section?
Yes.
And then after they did that, they built the barn and then sold off the tent.
That's correct. They built the barn. They got a building permit to build the barn first, and then subsequently platted it and sold it off.
Which then changed it to another classification of non-conforming.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's correct.
But you're saying if a tornado or a fire took the barn out, you can't rebuild on that same foundation?
No, it's a non-conforming use because right now there's no principal use. There's no established principal use on the property, which would be a residence.
But you still could, even if the barn blew down and we didn't do anything, you could still come back and get a conditional use permit and put that barn right back up.
If they were going to operate a stable, if they came back in to ask for a conditional use permit for a stable, as I indicated, our definition would be a stable would be where you would board other people's horses in return for money. But I mean, you could not board someone else's horses. I guess that's more of a legal issue and whether you're skirting the law. But
if I may throw this out, we talked about the planned development as a possible solution to this. As Scott's alluding to, I mean, it's always in the power of the commission. If you think the current definition of stable is inadequate to encompass these type of operations, that you could amend that definition as well to take remuneration out of it too. That's another option that you might have. And frankly, you know, what I've heard from Commissioner Benega at least is, you know, maybe some lack of comfort with the non-conforming ordinance that we have, and that's always within the, I mean, obviously there'd be notice requirements going forward in discussion with that, but, you know, our non-conforming ordinance says what it says right now about destruction of a non-conforming building, but that's something you can also revisit too if you don't like that standard of how much damage needs to be done before it can't be replaced. But right now it's 60% of value, I think it was what it is. So I'll just throw those two things out there.
Commissioner Bender.
Scott, so I'm curious, I mean, it sounds like the solution that we could reach today is that we could here by motion amend the zoning so that the zoning is restricted just to allow a barn or a stable on this property. I'm curious why that's not how it came to us in the first place. I feel like maybe I'm missing something. That's what I'm worried about.
Well, you know, these things sort of evolve as we start discussing them. And when I met with the applicant, we discussed that it didn't really have a principal use, that it was a 10-acre parcel, and I don't think that we really, either one of us, had really thought of, well, you could just do a planned development for just the barn and just leave the barn there. We were sort of in the mindset of wanting, the ability for any future buyer to build a house there, because that was, I think, what the applicant, the Holmans, had been primarily approached by the public was, well, I really would, like to have a house there so I could have my horses with my house, which, worked for the Holmans because they were very close to that barn when they bought it in 2012. They were, a half-mile away or less, so it was easy for them to just pop over there and take care of the horses, which isn't always the case for a lot of people. If you wanted to buy this to keep your horses and you lived in Sioux Falls, it's a 20-minute drive out there, and so we never really discussed that option, I guess.
But you don't see thinking right now here, because this seems like a pretty elegant solution to address both Mr. Cipher's concerns and the Holman's expressed desires. You don't see any downside. I mean, there's not some precedents here that we're missing that we need to worry about.
I think it's a viable option where you could say this is the waterway meadows that would allow one barn/stable, and but then you could have someone out there renting their horses too. But I don't think there's really that big a deal. But
Kirsten, I think Kirsten has a comment.
Well, being a new solution and reviewing our ordinances right now, looking in Chapter 10 of our revised zoning ordinances, I would encourage you that if you're going to take this action, I know it's a matter that we're currently discussing before you, but there are some statements in our ordinance that go to the intent of the use of the planned development district projects. I would encourage you to review that 10.01 as to what the intent is. You probably don't have it before you, but when considering putting forth a planned development with only a horse barn, we talked a little bit about precedent today. I will point out that our other planned development districts that are enumerated in our ordinances, Scott can correct me if I'm wrong, but my impression is this would be a very different use of planned development. I'm not speaking to whether it's, I think it fits within the text of what it is, but I do think it's different than the ones that have been put forward to date.
Typically they have been more of a residential aspect to most of our planned developments, but if you recall, we did a planned development for the ethanol plant, which it was not a residential use. The ethanol plant in Sherman that eventually was defunct, and we took it back to just ag. We rezoned it back, but originally that was a planned development. So you can have commercial planned developments, you can have residential planned developments, and if you were going to call this thing a stable, I would say have more of somewhat of a commercial aspect to it as well.
Commissioner Kelly.
Well, this is still a rather unusual stretch of the planned development concept, isn't it?
Well,
I got two questions. That's the first one. I mean, is this is the ethanol plant the only thing which was a commercial development, is that the only time we've ever strayed from a multiple housing situation in a planned development?
We've had other planned developments that have commercial components to them, like out by Iverson Crossing. We have a that is both residential and commercial. So I think
But this is not commercial.
No, it wouldn't be, but if you're going to call it a stable, you're going to allow them to be able to rent it out to people. So I would say that's a commercial use, a somewhat quasi-commercial use. And I'm a firm believer of being free-thinking and trying to make government work. And I've been working with the Holmans, and I'm just trying to, we're working on this together to try and make a solution that is going to address the problem that's out there. And as I see it, the problem that's out there is you have a non-conforming use. And that use is always going to be dangling out there, right now it's just dangling out there. And in my world, I like to have things that sort of fit in a nice, that have a nice method that you can work with them. And right now, this is something that's out there. It's a non-conforming use. We never like to see non-conformities. We like to see things always conform. That makes our world nice and ordered. And so, you know, I think what the Holmans are doing, or what the applicant is doing, you know, I can support the idea of trying to address the problem that's out there. Whether this is exactly the best method, you know, maybe there are other methods, like what Commissioner Cipher said. Well, maybe we could issue them a conditional use permit to do a stable. That would also eliminate that nonconformity, in my opinion, and that is one option. But when the applicant, the Holmans, came into my office, we really discussed what options they had to be able to put one residence on there as well. And, you know, we talked about rural residential. I said that would not, in my opinion, I wouldn't support that. I don't think that would be appropriate, because that would open it up to maybe 8 or 9 residential lots, and I don't think that's what anyone wanted out there. So the next best thing was the planned development, in my opinion, and that's the route that the Holmans chose, the applicant chose to pursue. So that's where we're at today.
Commissioner Kelly.
Well, I still think it's a stretch, but if we upheld the Planning Commission's denial, do the Holmans have an option of bringing it back to the Planning Commission with all the information that would be given today, which apparently was not given to the Planning Commission? And I'm not sure that it's really our job to make a decision that moves away from what the original thing was that far. I mean, if at the least, I think this has to go back to Planning Commission.
So, this is my opinion, and Kirsten, Mr. Kappermeyer can correct me, but if they brought back the same request, they have to wait 6 months. If they bring back an alternate or a different request, they can bring that back immediately. I would say that changing this to just a horse barn use with no residential component is significant enough of a change that we could act on it immediately.
Okay. I would agree with that.
I'm going to weigh in just because. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Because I haven't said anything, and I did talk to Mr. Holman yesterday a little bit, and I would like to see some type of solution. I'm not really in favor of changing the zoning on this away from agriculture. I think it's a good agricultural fit. It could be the next door neighbor could end up buying it and putting it back in agriculture. I do think we need to find a solution for that barn, and I would like to see it go back to the planning and get a conditional use permit. I don't know why it can't have a conditional use permit. I can understand their concern that they would like to have the permit ahead of time. It's also unfortunate when this stuff happens that somebody sells off a little tract and you buy it as a buyer and think you're all fine, and come to find out later that it doesn't qualify for standards or for our ordinances. I remember we had a case about 2 or 3 years ago where a Greek-speaking family came in here and had to have an interpreter because they couldn't talk to us. They had bought over 20 acres, put the trees on the lot, and were all ready to go to build the house, found out they couldn't build a house. And that was a big deal. And that was horrible to send them away and say no. And all their neighbors said, we won't sell. And eventually they did sell. Someone sold them. But those building eligibilities come at a very high price. And I think we do a disservice to the people who do have it by just giving one. So I think that part's out. But as far as the rezoning, I'm still uncomfortable with rezoning just for, excuse me, a barn. And I would be more comfortable with getting a conditional use permit in place so they could keep the barn and it could be rebuilt. So,
if I may, Chair, and to clarify the record here, I think it's kind of back and forth, but I just want to ask Scott this to clarify the record in case somebody looks at this later. The original permit in 2005 was for a large enough parcel that this was a conforming use, correct? Yes. And before the Holmans bought it, the prior owner made the decision to split this smaller parcel off, rendering it non-conforming. Is that true?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, Pam, just a second.
Okay.
Sorry,
well,
Pam has a comment.
Sure.
So.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just trying to drill down to what exactly happened here.
I have the plat approval from February 15th of 2005. The owner we bought it from did not own more than the 10 acres. The plat approval that created this 10 acres was purchased from Dewey and Donna Bakken in February 15th, 2005. In April 12, 2005, the county then granted a permit for the barn with septic system to those owners.
Okay.
So,
I'm sorry, I was incorrect on that.
yeah.
Okay, I just want to clarify that either way.
They did not do as has been discussed. They purchased the 10 acres and plat development from a different landowner, and following that, 2 months later, received the permission for the barn.
Okay. I'm glad I asked then. Thank you.
And Commissioner Benega.
Well, frankly, I think we're getting a little confused on this because this is not a building eligibility. This is an eligibility to continue to operate a 10-acre plot that they've been paying taxes on and was, frankly, adopted in 2005, 11 years ago, to continue with that operation. The fuzziness comes, in my estimation, about whether this is a barn or a stable, which to me is kind of a mute point, frankly. And I'm going to make a recommendation that we take care of this today, because I think to wait 6 more months to get a conditional use permit and have the same discussion and do the same thing that we could do today is setting a precedence. But this is an unusual piece of property. I think if I owned this property and I was paying taxes, and whether I thought it was a barn or if it was a stable is not the issue. If all I want to do is replace the barn if it's destroyed. So I'm going to make what I would call maybe a common sense motion, is that we change waterways meadows to a planned development with a restriction of use rebuilding the existing structure to occupy either a stable or a barn.
So the motion is to rezone from agricultural to waterways, meadows, planned development with the condition of only a barn or stable.
Correct.
And that will stand forever.
On this piece of property, they can come back and they can do whatever they want, just like anybody else can change the building permit issues from a 40-acre plot to a 2-acre plot, or whatever they want to do. We're not making this black and white. We're trying to take care of a problem that exists based on some zoning issues and a building permit. Does it set a precedent? No, because anybody else can come and make changes if they feel like the ordinances aren't correct.
Commissioner Hagerberg, I'll second that motion for purposes of discussion.
Okay. Kirsten, did you have a comment you're thinking?
No.
Okay.
I'd like to hear the discussion.
Commissioner Benega.
Well, I guess my question is, and just to maybe clarify what Commissioner Benega was saying, and to your point, Commissioner Heiberger, if we approve this today and one of the adjoining owners decides they want to take this land back to agriculture, they just need to come back in for rezoning, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'd like to make a
Commissioner
substitute motion.
Commissioner Kelly, substitute motion.
Substitute motion would be to refer this back to the planning committee, and based on the information that we've been given today.
We have a substitute motion to refer
I'll
back
second
to
that.
with the second. Any additional conversation,
Well,
Commissioner Kelly?
The only reason is I believe, one, it's a significant change from what the Planning Commission denied, that, you know, if we're going to change this thing, maybe we ought to be changing the whole ordinances. We still, you know, that there was I suppose on that half, there was, what, two building eligibilities on that whole half section. There was a reason why we do that, and I also think this is quite a long stretch from what I would see as a planned development purpose.
We have a motion and a second to refer back to the planning, and this was a substitute motion. Any other comments? We vote.
I need a second.
We did a second.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yeah. Commissioner Benega?
I'm not seeing why this is such a stretch. If I look back at the minutes, and frankly I did that a few weeks ago, so I could be completely wrong, but their original intent was to do exactly what we're doing now with the motion that I made. they weren't trying to get a building permit, other than the fact that when they were denied the building permits, which I understand, and changed this into a planned development, still using the permit to build a stable or a barn, is the same thing that they requested 5 years ago when they bought the property, and have used it like that since.
If I may.
Commissioner,
Commissioner Barr, since you're on the Planning Commission, my question would be, was there any discussion of any other options other than the planned development?
Commissioner Kelly, no, there really was not.
Thank you.
I also want to say for the record that we need to make sure anybody that talked to the Homans prior to this on the phone needs to at least disclose it for the record, just that you talked to him on the phone. So I did.
I've talked to him on the phone.
Okay.
I talked to him on the phone and told him I couldn't talk to him.
I got a voicemail.
I didn't hear Commissioner Kelly's last comment. Would you mind repeating it?
Madam Chair, he just asked if we had discussed alternatives at the Planning Commission. We did not.
Okay. Okay, so I have a substitute motion right now, if you're done discussing, to refer back to the planning. Ready to vote on it?
To substitute.
We're voting this substitute, right? We're voting this substitute motion right now is to refer back to the planning. Do we need a roll call vote?
Please.
Roll call vote?
Commissioner Barr?
Aye.
Bender?
No.
Benega?
No.
Kelly?
Aye.
Heiberger?
Aye. So the substitute motion passes 3-2. Then
No, we have
Then
to
you have to
vote.
vote
the
on the
original,
substitute.
which
As substitute.
as substitute. Now we have a motion on the original motion as substituted. And roll call vote.
We need a motion, a second.
Oh, I need a motion and a second on the.
Oh, no, we substituted it, so
Yeah,
that's
so
before you for a vote now. The substitution was all in one.
Yeah, so now
we're
the
good.
substitution
Is it
goes
too
to
late
the.
to ask a question?
Yeah, no, go ahead and ask a question.
So if we approve this motion, can somebody explain to me exactly what happens?
It goes back to the planning, and they can go back immediately.
It would be Mr.
Timing-wise, how fast can they be back here?
This next month, right?
We meet later this month, and then any appeal from that would be 20 days later, right?
Commissioner Bender, I have to ask the same question myself of the state's attorney's office, because I'm not sure now whether we need to re-advertise this for a potential. I mean, we had already advertised this, and it gets into a sort of a legalistic question.
We need to provide notice all over. I mean,
So
I
we'll
would
have
think
to-
in fairness we would have to.
We'll have to re-advertise this, and
If you pass the motion.
well, I think I can get it advertised, and we can get it on the 26th of October meeting.
So it doesn't delay it.
And it would come back to you again in November then. So you're basically looking at a 6 to 7 week delay. It'll be back in front of you. And that would be as a planned development, because you're referring back a planned development, and we would address whether we would allow a stable / accessory building barn as a planned development.
And as a point of order, too, if you were, I'm not saying, but so you know, if you were to deny this today and they brought back a materially different proposal, they could do that immediately.
They could do that immediately, too.
So, but
this has been voted on.
Well, it's been substituted. It has not passed yet.
Could you explain what you just said?
Yeah,
Like,
well,
so-
I don't understand that.
We talked about this today, that the proposal as it is before you is what is forwarded from the Planning Commission. If you were to vote to deny that, that doesn't mean they can't address the issue for 6 months, as long as they don't bring back the same proposal. What it means is they could bring a different proposal as soon as they could validly get it on the next agenda. If you vote to send it back, it's in the context of, well, I mean, and we can change the conditions of the planned development, like Commissioner Benega talked about no building eligibility, and it's a stable and whatever. But that can be sent back immediately on your positive vote on this motion to send it back. if that makes sense.
So the substitute motion basically does what we could have done here today anyway. So Commissioner Kelly, if that's what you want on the substitute motion, it would just go back and come back to us exactly the same way.
My question is on the substitute motion, that substitutes the motion that was on the floor.
Correct.
When we voted on it, wasn't that the end of it?
No. You need to vote on, you were voting to substitute it. Now it's substituted. Now you vote on the.
No, that's the main motion.
So it's just like an amendment then.
Right, because you could conceivably want the substitute motion to come forward and maybe not want to vote to pass it.
So do you need a motion then?
No, we don't need another motion. We're trying to decide what will happen. If we go ahead with the substitute motion, they have to take it back in the same form to the planning zone.
We're just denying, I mean, we're not acting is what we're doing, isn't that correct? I mean, we're taking,
You're remanding it.
the only action is we're sending it back to the planning commission.
But it would be the same thing, would go back to them, which they're going to probably send it back with another denial. So all we've done is
Well,
delay
not
it.
necessarily. They can make changes.
Madam Chair, the other alternatives would then be able to be discussed. And so instead of rejecting it and having a 6-month delay, we would be able to, come up with a different plan that might be more palatable.
But the different plan only includes the zoning, the rezoning, correct?
It would be a plan development proposal, but you could discuss what is in that.
Right. So if it goes back, it can only be a plan development. That's the only thing you can discuss.
But isn't that what my motion was originally?
Right.
Correct.
So what are we doing that for? Just to
so-
delay it so that the planning commission can come back and tell us again that we're not correct?
That's my point. So if you want to have more options available, such as the one where Scott suggested or somebody suggested that they just get a conditional use permit, we can't even send it back. We're not sending it back for that.
But they denied that originally.
No, we never had a
That's
conditional
never. They've
use.
never talked about that one. That one has not been discussed.
It sounds like a 3-ring circus.
It sounds like a
correct?
3-ring circus that wasn't quite ready. So if we deny, if we go along with the amended motion, it goes back to the planning exactly as it is right now, but they could change in there what their conditions are for that plan development.
That's fine.
So if we
That's fine.
deny this current motion that's on the table, we could have a substitute motion that we just deny this, and then it could go back as anything they wanted. Kirsten?
You can, if this motion fails currently before us,
Okay.
you can propose any other motion to act upon it in your authority as the reviewing board. But you could do that. That's one of the things you could do.
But my question is, if we denied it here, they can take it back in October with a new proposal of anything,
As long as it's material different than the proposal they brought this time, that's my opinion.
And is the material difference different that they would bring back? Even one of their options could be the Waterway Meadows District so they could bring back more than one proposal? No.
And the flip side of that conversation is if we accept the motion, then we just wiped everything off the table and they have to wait 6 months.
No, if we accept the motion, they get to come back in October.
We're accepting the denial.
No, you're not.
Okay. Point of order. The motion before you is to remand it back to the Planning Commission for reconsideration of the Plan Development District. The conditions of the Plan Development District, the Planning Commission can reconsider, but it's that plan development that will be remanded for further consideration of the Planning Commission.
Whereas if we reject this and have that 6-month delay, they could come back next month with a conditional use thing for that barn. And
That's my opinion, yes.
But
that
what
might
I
be
understood
cleaner.
Scott to say is that if we upheld the planning commission, if instead we upheld the planning commission's rejection, that they can bring this back to the planning commission in a new form with significant changes to the next meeting.
I think I could fit it on.
As long as it's properly noticed, yes.
Because it seems to me it's all about, the value of the property. And
Does an acceptance of this motion currently before us and sending it back to planning eliminate their ability to come in with a conditional use next month?
That was my question.
Madam Chair, that seems to be what I see now as, you know, I would like the Planning Commission to have the opportunity to discuss all the options, but apparently that would not be the case.
Right, Kirsten?
I suppose it could be put on as two separate items on the same agenda, but I think there's some question about that. I really don't want to say that that's permissible, I guess. So.
I do have one more question. I'm sorry, still trying to decide. So if we deny this, then they can still come back in 2 weeks with a different proposal.
If you deny it by upholding the decision of the Planning Commission, they can bring back a significantly altered plan as soon as they possibly can notice it, and I would assume that would be to the next planning meeting.
Okay. Commissioner Kelly?
There's nothing to stop them, though, from bringing another request in for the CUP solution in addition to reviewing this one, is there?
I'm not going to opine on that. I'm not sure.
Well, no, but I mean, Scott, can they?
They could bring both.
Can you have two issues on the same
property? I would let them bring both in, and we would take action on one.
Then you decide one or the other.
Okay.
Yeah, and
we could do that.
Then if
as long as they can bring them both.
It's a little conventional, but
as long as they can have their options on the table, that's what I'm concerned.
whole thing's unconventional.
All right, we have a motion on the second that has been substituted to refer back to the planning.
I'm not 100% sure what the heck I'm voting on.
We better do a roll call vote.
Well,
we have another
should we
comment?
clarify
Okay.
this?
Okay,
You're
clarify
voting on a
it. Okay.
substitute. You're voting on a substitute motion to remand the matter back to the Planning Commission to consider the plan development proposal. What conditions are in that plan development proposal can be upheld, altered, denied, whatever by the Planning Commission, but it's in that plan development structure that's going back.
But according to Scott, they can bring another proposal too.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the motion. Does everybody understand it now? Okay. Your roll call vote.
Commissioner Barth?
Aye.
Bender?
No.
Benega?
No.
Kelly?
Yes.
Heiberger?
Yes. Motion passes 3-2. Sorry, got 2 more weeks. They'll figure it out.
Hope you'll live long enough.
Item number 11 is consider motion to approve the change order number 1 in the amount of $988 to the contract with SFC Civil Contractors for project number MC Bridge Bearing 2015 repair of bearing on 3 structures. DJ Boothie, good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. DJ Boothie, Highway Superintendent. This one should be pretty straightforward. We are preparing to do some bridge maintenance with a contract with Sioux Falls Construction. They're replacing a bearing on one of our structures, and during their initial inspection, they noticed a small hole in one of the beams, and they need to put some plates on that beam web prior to repairing the bearings. So they've given us a price of $988, which is acceptable. We just need to execute this change order prior to doing the work.
Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second. Any questions for DJ? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Item number 12 is report on September 26, 2015 tax deed auction and surplus county property auction, and consider a motion to approve resolution for the sale of tax deed properties RDID 24029 and RDID 53766. Bob Letts, good morning.
Good morning, Commission. Cindy, you about said it all for me. I don't know if I should just ask for questions, but anyway, on September 26, 2015, the Auditor's Office held its annual tax deed sale. On the sale day, there were 3 tax deed properties that were sold for a total of $14,150. Tax deed number 2575 and tax deed number 2593 were fully paid on the day of the sale. The remaining tax deed number 2539 is still awaiting full payment. The action we're requesting today is the approval of 2 resolutions of sale that have been fully paid, so that we may abate all outstanding taxes, penalties, and interest. Hold it. I'm going to read this here because Cindy and I got together here, and we've got the exact wording of what the action is that we're requesting today. The action requested is for the approval of the tax deed and surplus property sales and the approval of 2 resolutions for RDID 53766 and RDID 24029, authorizing the treasurer to issue quick claim deeds and the auditor to abate outstanding taxes, interest, and penalties and special assessments. Now, there was 2 other, there's 3 tax deeds, properties on this sale, and there were 2 other ones that were declared surplus by you out in Corson here. So we've been going through that. They were also moved on the sale. And those 2 properties were sold for a total of $82,500. And that money, that $82,500, since it was gifted to the county, goes directly into our general fund. The other amount fully collected, $14,150, will get apportioned out to the taxing entities. Are there any questions that I can answer? And then I should also tell you, there was a property out in Humboldt, South Dakota, that last year I pulled off the sale because we weren't getting any bids for it. And actually there was another property that I pulled off the sale too, which is in the southwest corner of Sioux Falls. We were not getting any bids on that. This year the Humboldt property sold for $3,000. Okay. It was also discovered that the other piece of property that I pulled off the sale last year had a big pile of dirt that the DJ and Lloyd expressed interest in it. So I kept that off the sale until the dirt is gone, and I think a little time may hopefully improve our fortunes on that piece out in southwest Sioux Falls.
Okay. Any questions for Bob? He did state the motion. Does anybody want to act on his motion without repeating it?
I'd make a motion to approve. I do have a comment, I guess.
So motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Comment by Commissioner Barth.
Thank you for the good result this year, Bob, and please sell more properties.
Well, you never know what's going to happen. Like I say, we sold one this year that I couldn't get a bite on last year, and then the ones out in Corson there, honestly, nobody expected to get that. So
yeah,
it's
nice
open to prognostication as to why that number went up so high.
Yeah. A motion and a second to approve the tax deed auctions. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Item number 13 is authorize the chairman to sign the elevator service contract with Cone Elevators, Escalators as a participant in the U.S. Communities Program. Mark, good morning.
Good morning, Commission. Mark Krins, Facilities Department. Minnehaha County currently owns 13 Kone elevators, and as of right now, 7 of those elevators are under full service contract, and the remaining 6 are under planned maintenance contract. Kone presented us a new elevator service contract that puts all 13 of them under the full service contract, and for $1,123.20 less annually cost. The contract is 5 years. We can cancel anytime. It falls under the U.S. Communities Government Purchasing Alliance, which we are a member of. The contract includes parts and labor unless an update or an obsolete part.
Okay. Any questions on this contract? Is there a motion?
Motion to cancel the current contract and enter into the new contract.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Next, item number 14, thank you, Mark, is Minnehaha County liaison reports. Are there any liaison reports? Just going to give you a quick one. I spent this last week. I was in Phoenix on a JDAI conference, and just give you a very short update. I actually had a lot of things written, so I'm not sure which I want to tackle for you, but JDAI is going to start moving towards the deep end, which is the kids post-adjudicated, to start to work on closing down juvenile prisons, and that's kind of their new direction that they're going. They are still staying with the program that, or the thrust that they use now with the decrease of kids in pre-adjudicated stays. They talked about since the baseline when they started this whole process of how we treat our kids in the court system, they've had a 43% decrease in average length of stay and the average length of population in kids in detention nationwide. They've had 60,000 less admissions. They've had 1.3 million fewer bed days, and they've decreased the racial ethnic disparities by about 43% across the nation. There are a lot more, obviously, statistical numbers, but great things have happened since they've been doing this, and it's been over about 20 years period. I went to quite a few different breakout sessions that were very interesting, stuff that might be beneficial to us going forward. One of them I went to was on the Baltimore Rising and the lessons that they learned in their crisis management and stuff, and it was very interesting to hear kind of the inside story of what had happened, maybe what you didn't hear on the news about how things kind of blew out of proportion very quickly. And they admitted, not, I wouldn't say fault, but just talked about some of the things that they could have done better. Communication, I think, was good, but there was still some cleanup that they could have done in communication and some of the improvements that they've made upon it. And I don't think you really understand what's going to happen until you're in the middle of a crisis and you go back later and you're cleaning up the mess and saying, what could we have done better? And so they had some suggestions on how to handle a crisis situation. Granted, they're a bigger city than we are, and where their locations of their schools and their Justice Department and their Sheriff's Office and all that was all located in one area, which actually caused more concern as they shut down the city. They shut down all those kids in the center of the city with no transportation home. But just some very interesting tips that came out of that. Anyway, I think it was very worthwhile. I learned a lot of things. I don't know how many more JDAI conferences I'll be invited to because it's paid for usually completely by JDAI. This time we did pay for my airline tickets, but otherwise it was paid for by the foundation. And just a very good seminar again, or very good workshop. So with that, if there are no other reports, we'll go on. Is there any new business? Is there any old business? And we have no executive session, so I'd look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion, and is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. All same sign. Motion passes unanimously. We are adjourned.